Good morning. Happy Earth Day. I'm Patty Kester, Executive Director of Nature and Wildlife Discovery Center. Thank you for joining us today to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. Today is a time to celebrate the planet that sustains us. The Earth is alive, and I'm not referring to the 2 million animal species or over 7 million plant species with whom we share this time and space. A single handful of soil, Earth, contains more microbes than there are people in the world. Earth Day is about increasing awareness of how our actions affect the Earth, being aware of our everyday decisions, and making a commitment to respect the Earth and all of the other life with whom we share our unique planet. Teach your children what we have taught our children, that the Earth is our mother. Whatever befalls the Earth befalls the sons of the Earth. This we know. The Earth does not belong to man. Man belongs to the Earth. All things are connected, like the blood which unites one family. Whatever befalls the Earth befalls the sons of the Earth. Man did not weave the web of life. He is merely a strand in it. Whatever he does to the web, he does to himself. And these are not my words. This famous quotation, made popular in the 1970s, was most likely written for a screenplay by Ted Perry in 1970, but may have been loosely based on a speech delivered in 1854 or 55 by the Duwamish-Suquamish namesake of the city of Seattle. Whatever the source, they are true and powerful words. We are connected to all life and to the Earth. Nature and Wildlife Discovery Center promotes environmental stewardship and community health through nature education, wildlife rehabilitation, and outdoor recreation. Connecting people to nature may well be our best hope for the health of our planet and the survival of Earthlings, including humanity. The history of Earth Day and that of Nature and Wildlife Discovery Center are inexplicably tied through two people, Rachel Carson and Arthur Carhart. In her 1962 book, Silent Spring, Rachel Carson warned people, a war against nature was ultimately a war against ourselves. She warned us that chemicals were polluting our soil and our waterways. She told us about the potential loss of animal species and genetic abnormalities caused by pesticides, moving through the food chain and accumulating in the fatty tissues of animals, especially predators, including humans. During her 4 years of research and writing, she encountered the written works of a man named Arthur Carhart. The two shared a love of nature, concerns about the impact of pesticides on the ecosystem, and they shared brief correspondence with one another. Arthur Carhart is a name with which many of us connected to Pueblo Mountain Park are already familiar. Arthur Carhart was the first landscape architect hired by the U.S. National Forest Service. He was hired March 1, 1919, with the official title of Recreation Engineer. His ideas would ultimately influence and shape policies and procedures of the U.S. National Forest Service, still in practice today with their multiple use philosophy. Arthur Carhart introduced the idea of outdoor recreation as a land use concept, but he believed that some areas should be preserved. It is largely due to this value of preserving primitive areas that the Trappers Lake vicinity in Colorado and the boundary waters in Minnesota are preserved as wilderness areas today. The first comprehensive forest-wide recreation plan in the nation was developed by Arthur Carhart for San Isabel National Forest. He conceptualized and supervised development of the Squirrel Creek Recreation District, which included Squirrel Creek Campground. It was the first U.S. Forest Service campground designed specifically for recreation. Although Squirrel Creek Campground was destroyed by a 1947 flood, ruins remain today and can be found between Davenport Campground and US Highway 65 on Squirrel Creek Trail. Arthur Carhart and the San Isabel Public Recreation Association were instrumental in persuading the city of Pueblo to purchase 600 acres of forest land in Beulah on January 15, 1920. The land, designated as Pueblo Mountain Park, is adjacent to the San Isabel National Forest. The Carhart Trail, recently completed by Southern Colorado Trail Builders, now links Pueblo Mountain Park hiking trails to the San Isabel National Forest trail system, which includes Squirrel Creek Trail. Pueblo Mountain Park, still owned by the city of Pueblo, is managed by Nature and Wildlife Discovery Center. With Silent Spring, Rachel Carson set the stage to ignite the environmental movement in the United States, which led to the first Earth Day. Unfortunately, she did not live to see the first Earth Day or to know the full impact of her work. By the time of her death in 1964, Silent Spring had sold 1 million copies and launched a national discussion. Armed with a concern for the deteriorating environment and anger over a massive January 1969 oil spill in Santa Barbara, California, a junior Democratic senator from Wisconsin, Gaylord Nelson, inspired by the energy of the student war protest movement, decided he wanted to harness that energy for the environment. He enlisted the help of California Republican Congressman Pete McCloskey and Dennis Hayes, a young activist, to organize a student teach-in event. The three chose April 22nd, a weekday between spring break and final exams. Hayes, recognizing the potential of the idea, established a national staff and recruited youth groups, organizations, and faith communities across the country. They changed the name to Earth Day and immediately captured media attention. Groups that had been fighting for individual causes against oil spills, polluting factories and power plants, raw sewage, toxic dumps, pesticides, the loss of wilderness, and the extinction of wildlife species, united to form one cohesive movement. Earth Day achieved the unusual political alignment of rich and poor, Republican and Democrat, city dwellers and farmers, businesses and labor leaders. 20 million inspired Americans, at the time it was 10% of the US population, got involved. Thousands from colleges and universities organized massive coast-to-coast rallies, and people organized community service projects for the earth. They cleaned trails and waterways, planted trees, and contacted their legislators. Earth Day engaged people of all ages, but especially young people. In 1970, the first Earth Day led to the creation of the United States Environmental Protection Agency, the National Environmental Education Act, the Occupational Safety and Health Act, and the Clean Air Act. Congress passed the Clean Water Act 2 years later and the Endangered Species Act the following year. Dennis Hayes was approached again in 1990 to organize a major campaign for the planet. This time, Earth Day went global. 20 million people from 141 countries lifted environmental issues to the world stage. Earth Day 1990 paved the way for the 1992 United Nations Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro and boosted recycling efforts worldwide. President Clinton awarded Senator Nelson the Presidential Medal of Freedom for his role as the Earth Day founder. The Earth Day movement now engages more than 1 billion people from 193 countries around the world and has become a catalyst for engagement in the protection of our planet. We have so much work today to do. Today, on the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, we find ourselves safe at home, trying to slow the spread of a dangerous virus. All of us know this story. It has taken control of our daily lives. We extend our heartfelt sympathy to anyone who has lost a loved one. If you are ill, we wish you a speedy and complete recovery. There may be a silver lining for the earth and maybe for humanity. We are driving less. Air traffic has slowed nearly to a halt. Nearly every industry has slowed down. The skies are clearer. Animals feel more free to wander. People are outside walking with their families, slowing down and spending time together. Albeit temporarily, the earth is a little healthier, even though we know that the human race is facing an uncertain time. We hope that you and your family are well during these challenging times. Thank you for joining us today in celebration of Earth Day with Nature and Wildlife Discovery Center, as we recognize the legacy of Arthur Carhart, Rachel Carson, Gaylord Nelson, and the many others who have come before us. Please help us foster a passion in the next generation to care for and respect the earth. We hope that you will make Nature and Wildlife Discovery Center an important part of your annual Earth Day celebration and service to the earth. Please enjoy Earth Day with us today as we explore local mammals through show and tell with Ranger Paul, discover Earthkeeper Nature School on a guided hike with Rangers Tami and Gia, tour Horseshoe Lodge at Pueblo Mountain Park with Ranger Dave, study birds of prey with special guests Piper and Diana from our Raptor Center, and view wolves of the West with Ranger Pine. The work of Nature and Wildlife Discovery Center, exploring outdoors at both the River Campus and Pueblo Mountain Park, meeting and caring for birds of prey at the Raptor Center, implementing the Healthy Forest Project in Pueblo Mountain Park, and teaching environmental stewardship have always been driven by a love of people, nature, and the outdoors. Please consider making an Earth Day contribution today to help us continue our mission. No contribution is too large or too small. Every gift is greatly appreciated. Remember, Nature and Wildlife Discovery Center memberships are half price today, Earth Day, for one day only. Please stand by during a brief intermission to enjoy show and tell with Ranger Paul at the River Campus to learn more about local mammals that you may encounter at our Pueblo and Beulah outdoor campuses.
How's it going, guys? My name is Ranger Paul, and I actually have some really cool skins and skulls belonging to some native Colorado creatures. We're going to start off by introducing one of the more common animals that you're more likely to see out here in Colorado, a mule deer. And we're actually going to look at the skull first and kind of see some cool features that the skull has to show us. A good starting off place whenever looking at a skull is identifying what types of teeth the animal actually has. So an animal is most likely to have three types of teeth, either sharp, flat, or both sharp and flat. And these teeth tell us a lot about the animal. It tells us its diet, as well as whether it's a predator or a prey a lot of times. So while looking at this guy's teeth, as you guys can see right here, he has very flat teeth. They don't really come to a sharp, pointy edge like some of the teeth that we'll look at. Again, very, very flat teeth. And what this actually allows the animal to do, it's really designed for grinding up a lot of vegetation. Makes sense because deer mostly eat vegetation, right? Lots of tall grasses as well as some fruits and things like that. So we're going to notice a lot of flat teeth on this deer skull. The next thing I like to notice is the eyes, and not just the eyes, but the placement of the eyes. So in the wild kingdom, we have a saying, eyes in the front, ready to hunt, eyes on the side, ready to hide. What that means is, depending on where the creature's eyes are, we can see whether it's predator or prey. So for example, if this creature, like this one right here, his eyes are on the side, that means he's ready to hide, he's prey. A lot of like rabbits as well as rodents and things of that nature have the eye placement on the side of their head. That allows this creature to see 360 degrees around it, have a full peripheral view all the way around it. Now, when you go to predators, they're more likely to have the eyes in the front of their head, like humans. And this allows the creature to focus on one individual target when they're hunting. So as we notice on this deer skull, the eye placement is actually more to the side of their head, not right up front right here, but instead more right around this area right there. Nextly, what we're going to see is the actual size of these eyes, as well as the size of the nose. So a lot like our muscles, the bigger the eye size, as well as the bigger the nose size, the stronger the actual organ will be. So since this guy has very large eye sockets as well as a rather large nose, this is going to tell us that this guy is actually pretty good at seeing as well as smelling. Some of the other creatures that we're going to see are either going to have really small eyes, which means that they're really bad at seeing, or really small noses, which means that they're not so good at smelling. But this deer, on the other hand, he has both really good eyesight as well as really good smelling, which makes him really good at figuring out where someone's trying to, or when someone's trying to get him. He can sense when a mountain lion or when a bear is around him very, very easily. And the last thing I'm going to go mention about this deer skull is actually some kind of interesting things is this guy doesn't have any front teeth on the top of his skull. So right here, there's no teeth. Instead, what's right here is a hard gum pad. And he actually uses his bottom teeth to chew stuff up, and then it grinds up on this hard gum pad right here. So it kind of bites like this, scraping from the bottom up. And then last thing actually is you'll notice that this guy has two holes. Let's see if we can see those. One right here, as well as one right there. And what that tells us about this deer is actually a male deer. And so these two holes, these two small holes, are where his antlers grow every year. And so from these two holes, this male deer will grow some big antlers coming around the springtime, and those antlers will last all the way up until fall when they'll actually fall off. So that's just some cool stuff about this deer skull. Next, moving on to the actual hide of the deer. It's pretty thick when compared to our own skin. This protects it from a lot of like sharp objects that it might counter while it's running around in the forest. But most importantly, or most coolly about this guy is his actual fur. So if you guys can see that, it's kind of crimped, kind of wavy. What that allows the deer is it allows it to insulate itself. So these waves actually trap a lot of air, and that keeps it warm or cool depending on the weather. Very, very cool. Next creature that we're going to move on to is our largest rodent in North America, the North American beaver, right here. And so again, jumping off from our deer, what I like to do whenever looking at a skull is identifying what types of teeth this guy has. And when we're identifying teeth, we like to look only at the back teeth because front teeth can lie to us sometimes. And so looking at this back teeth, this is much more clear to see how flat it is. And again, flat teeth are really designed for eating up vegetables as well as vegetation, things like that. Now, something a little bit different about this beaver skull is these front teeth, these really large incisors. And so like previously said, this beaver does belong to the rodent family. And one common characteristic amongst all rodents is they have ever-growing incisors. So just like our fingernails are always growing, this beaver's front teeth are always growing. And so in order to combat that growing, make sure they don't grow too big, this guy gnaws on things. And more particular, he likes to gnaw on trees. And he gnaws on these trees, he breaks them down, and he uses them as homes. Doesn't really like to eat them. They're kind of too fibery for him. If he does eat the tree, it's going to be more of the branches or the bulbs and the leaves that are growing off of it, not really the bark or the bulk of the tree. So instead, what he does is he'll make a little dam, and that'll be his year-round living space. He'll have a different compartments in that dam, so he'll have a place where to sleep, a place to go to the bathroom, as well as a place to store food when it gets really cold. He uses the he uses underwater as like a refrigerator of some sort. Next thing I'd like us to look at is the eye placement. So again, eyes in the front, ready to hunt, eyes on the side, ready to hide. Now this beaver is just a little bit different because his eyes aren't really on the front or on the side, but actually on top of his head. So if you guys can see that right there, you kind of it comes flush when you put it just like this. The eyes are right here. And what that's designed for is this beaver actually spends most of his life underwater. And so when he does spend his life underwater, he doesn't want to lift his whole entire head out in order to see what's going around him. So with the eyes being on the top of his head, what that allows for is him just to barely raise his head up like that, the stomach line. So then you can see pretty much what's going all around him without sticking that whole entire head up and being exposed to enemies that might want to get him. And then last thing I want us to notice about this beaver skull is actually this like about 2 millimeter crest right here, right on the top of the head. And so what that crest is called is a sagittal crest. A lot of animals have this crest. And what that tells us is this beaver has a really strong bite. Anything with the sagittal crest, with the crest on top of their head, will have a really strong bite. And actually that's where all the jaw muscles are attached to. You don't see them too much in a lot of herbivores. They're more of a carnivorous feature. But since this beaver does need strong jaws to chop down trees, that's why I'll have one. The larger the crest, it tends to equal a larger bite. So this guy has a kind of large crest, so he kind of has a kind of large bite compared to a lot of other creatures. Now moving on to this beaver pelt, as you can see right here, it's very, very thick, very warm. It keeps this beaver really warm in cold months as well as when he's hanging out underwater. And a kind of cool quality that this pelt has is actually in 2 layers. So this first layer are these real brown furs that you can see, really, really long. And what these furs are designed to do is actually wick off water. So when he's swimming, the water won't absorb into him. And the second layer is a much thinner, much finer, softer layer. And this is actually what's meant to keep him warm. This is its insulation part. So first layer to keep the water off, the second layer to keep the warmth in. This beaver really needs that because he spends a lot of his time in the cold water, and it really helps him out a lot. Next, let's go on to our canines, our foxes, as well as our coyotes. Now I have 3 canine skulls for you guys. First will be the fox skulls, fox variants. On my right, I have a red fox skull. Ooh, let me get it out for you guys. Which is the smaller of the foxes that we have in Colorado. So this one's a red fox skull. These are going to be the guys that you see more around your suburb areas. And then right here, we actually have the gray fox skull, which is a little bit larger, and he's more tended to hang out around foresty areas. So more likely to see him up in the mountains. Now, both of these foxes share similar types of teeth, as in that they have a lot of sharp teeth up here, but in the very, very back, they have some flat teeth. So right here, and in the very, very back, he has 1 or 2 flat teeth. And now what this tells about this creature is he both eats meat and vegetables. So the sharp teeth are designed for ripping up the meat. The back flat teeth are designed for grinding up vegetation. We do notice though that he has a lot more sharp teeth than he does flat teeth. So what that tells us is this guy eats a lot more meat than vegetables. Now looking towards eye placement, kind of opposite to our previous 2 guys, these creatures' eyes are right in front of his head. And what that tells us about this is these guys are hunters. They are predators. They like to go and hunt for their food instead of grazing around for it. These guys are opportunist hunters, so that means that they don't really mind what they go and get. That could be anything from trash that you leave around or birds and things of that nature that they find just hanging out. Anything that they see that they can eat, they'll eat. Now moving on to their actual pelts. We have our red fox right here, obviously with the red tint and the red hues. And then we have our gray fox right here. Again, our gray fox will be the larger of the foxes. The gray fox, again, is going to be the fox that you're most likely to see in the mountains. Red fox is most likely to see out in the suburban areas. Red foxes are a little bit different though, because they can be a lot of different colors, anywhere from gray to silver and things of that nature. But the way that you can always tell a red fox is a red fox is the tail. Red foxes will have a bushy white tail, and compared to the gray fox, where it's more of a ring pattern, as you can see, kind of rings around, no bushy white end. One thing the gray fox does do that's really cool is he's actually the only canine in North America, so the only dog cousin that can actually climb trees, and he's a very good climber. He climbs trees to go and get bird eggs as well as birds and things of that nature. And so his fur actually kind of blends into tree bark as well. So that's why he kind of has that grayish black tone instead of the red one. It's more for hiding out and uses it more of a camouflage. The gray foxes tend to be the more aggressive of the foxes too. So if you encounter a gray fox, he's more likely to be aggressive than the red one, which is more docile. Now finally, moving on to one of the larger canids that we have in North America, we have our coyote. This is one of the most well-adapted creatures in all of America and all of the world, actually. You guys can find him all the way from cities in New York, the big bustling cities up there, all the way to the plains of Wyoming. He can make a home just about anywhere. And he has a few adaptations that allow him to make those homes. One is he has a very, very thick fur, as you guys can see. Very, very thick fur, as well as some pretty cool teeth. Just like our foxes, this guy has some back teeth right here that are a little flat, as well as a whole bunch of sharp teeth up front. And again, like our foxes, what that tells us is this guy can eat vegetation, but he tends to stay away from it and actually prefers meat. But one thing that coyote is really cool at is he really doesn't care where he gets his next meal from. So he'll be able to find a meal out about anything that you can figure out. And then lastly about this coyote skull is his sagittal crest. So as you guys can see, this guy actually has a pretty big sagittal crest right in the back right there. And again, what that tells us about this creature is he has a pretty good bite. Now, moving on to our felines, we have a few here to show you guys. The first being the smaller of them, our bobcat. Now, this guy has a lot more of a circular head than the previous skulls that we're looking at. And circular heads mean that this guy likes to pounce on his prey. Individuals with a longer head like this coyote, for example, he's more well adapted to running and chasing down since he has such a long nasal cavity. It makes him very good at taking in that breath while he's running. That's completely opposite to this cat right here. As you can see, not quite as long as this coyote, a lot flatter. And what that allows this cat to do is sneak up and pounce on prey a lot easier. He doesn't have as large of a profile showing. Then looking at his teeth, as you can see right here, no flat teeth whatsoever. Very similar to the coyote, or to the fox, which one is right here. But instead, as you can see, the fox has these flat back teeth. This bobcat has no flat back teeth. What that tells us about the bobcat is that he is a carnivore and strictly a carnivore. He does not venture out and eat vegetation. He'll stick to only meat. He also, as we notice, he has much larger eyes than he does a snout. And again, like previously said with our deer, the larger the eyes or the larger the nose, the stronger that muscle or that organ will be. So this guy, since he has rather large eyes compared to his nose, that tells us that he has much better sight than he does smelling. And that makes sense because cats usually rely on their sight for hunting, not so much their smell. Now moving on to our larger of the felines, we have our mountain lion. Again, a very similar profile to our bobcat. All cats kind of share this circular profile of their head. This guy is just a little bit bigger. Looking at his teeth, again, we see no flat back teeth or no flat teeth whatsoever, meaning that this guy is a strictly carnivore creature. And again, looking at his eyes, this guy has quite large eyes compared to any of the other creatures that we saw. Very large eyes, and he actually has some of the best eyesight in Colorado. Very, very short nose though, so that tells us not too good of smelling. on the other hand. When we look up to the sagittal crest, he has one of the larger crests of any of the animals that we'll be seeing. So that means that tells us that this guy has one of the best bites, one of the hardest bites in all of Colorado. And he's one of the top predators, so that makes very much sense. Moving on to these actual furs of these animals. Right here we have a bobcat fur. Very, very soft, very precious. These guys can get about, let's say, 3 feet long and somewhere about 20 to 30 pounds. So they're pretty big, a little bit bigger than your standard house cat. They do have retractable claws. So just like any cat, any feline, they have what we call retractable claws. So if you have a cat, you know what that means. But if you don't, it means that they have the power to actually pull back their claws. So they don't always have their claws showing. Unlike dogs per se, dogs constantly have their claws or their fingernails clicking around. These cats, they retract them. And the reason being is that their claws are actually one of their primary hunting weapons. And so they have curved claws that allows them to hook into animals and go for the kill like that. Dogs on the other hand, or canines, for example, they don't really use those claws like that. If you ever throw a ball for a dog, let's say, he'll always catch it with his mouth, right? If you ever throw something for a cat, they like to paw around with it for a little bit. So that's just one little difference there. But this bobcat has very, very sharp claws. Those are used to catching things and bringing them down. This mountain lion, on the other hand, has much larger claws. It goes well with the size. So these guys can get anywhere from about 4 feet long and about 90 to 150 pounds on the very big side. He, again, like the bobcat, has retractable claws. Let's see if I can find some good ones for you. So right here, I don't know if you can see them. They're there, I promise. But this guy has some retractable claws too. They're a little bit bigger than our bobcats. And again, what they're used for is actually chasing down things and grabbing them, pulling them down. This guy's quite large. Almost as long as me. And he has this beautiful kind of brown color, right? And this works really well for him because he spends a lot of his time not only in the forest, but also kind of down here in the prairie where it's a lot of rocky kind of terrain. And so this brown color really helps him blend in and not stick out too much. Cats are usually hunters around noon to dusk till dawn. So that means that they like to hunt in low light levels. That really good eyesight kind of allows them to see really well in low light levels, as well as pouncing up on their prey. Now lastly, save the best for last, we have the oso, the black bear. This is this is the largest carnivore in Colorado. He's a omnivore, so he eats both meat and vegetables, but he's the largest one that we have to offer in Colorado. He does, though, mainly only eat veggies. And the way that we can tell that is by looking at his teeth. So when compared to a coyote teeth who's also an omnivore, but mainly eats meat, you can see that he mainly has sharp teeth right here, right? Almost nothing but sharp teeth until we get to the very, very back. Now this black bear is almost the complete opposite, where he has sharp teeth, only one or two, but then nothing but flat back teeth in the very, very back. So what that tells us about this black bear is he actually has a diet that consists about 90% of vegetation and only about 10% of actual meat. When he does go for meat, it's usually like rabbits and maybe some fawn and stuff like that. He's not too big of a hunter. He's much more of a scavenger kind of creature. When looking at his eye placement, again, we have eyes in the front of his head. Eyes in the front, you're ready to hunt, which tells us that this guy is a predator. But they're very, very, very small when compared to the previous creature that we were talking about. Very, very, very small. So what that tells about this bear is very bad eyesight. Actually, some of the worst in all of the Colorado Wild Kingdom. How he makes up for that is he has a rather large nose and a really good sense of smell. You actually can see in there all those dots, those smell receptors. And so this guy is really, really keen at smelling. Actually, some of the best smell in all of Colorado. He can smell meals or deer, trash, things of that nature from about like 3 miles away. So much better smell than some of our dogs too. So a lot of dog creatures don't have quite as good smell as bear. Last thing I would like to notice is just how large the sagittal crest is. So again, sagittal crest, the crest on the top of the skull, equates to large bites. So the larger the crest, the larger, the stronger the bite. This guy is actually the largest crest we've seen so far. So what that tells us is this guy has the largest or the strongest bite that we've seen so far. Very, very, very strong bite. Very large skull. And it's kind of crazy to think that this guy is able to power his whole entire body just by eating nothing but really nothing but plants and vegetables and things of that nature. He doesn't rely too much on meat, and yet he's able to grow into such big sizes. Now moving on to this actual bear skin. It's quite large, quite big. My friend Ashley actually helped me out here. As you can see, this guy can get all the way up to the very, very large sizes, around 6 feet tall. So that's pushing it, but he can get there. He's more likely to stay around the 4 feet range and about 300 pounds. That's the average size of these guys. But he doesn't have as quite as nice fur as the other creatures. It's kind of rough, very, very thick. What that allows him though is it allows him to keep warm in the winter months when he goes into not hibernation, but tortation, I think. It's a little bit different than hibernation. He does also have some pretty large and substantial claws, about 3 inches large, if you can see there. They are not retractable like our cats were. So instead, they're constantly being shown. They're always there. And what that makes it do is it actually kind of lessens the sharp, makes these claws pretty dull when compared to these cat claws, these feline claws. What this bear usually uses his claws for is completely different than the cats. He uses these claws for more of a digging tool, as well as breaking up logs and finding bugs in there. So not quite as a hunting tool, but more of a digging tool and things of that nature. Very cool. Well, I'd like to thank you guys for going with me with my little spiel. If you did like this program, I would be sure to advise you guys to actually join some of the camps that we offer here at the nature park. They'll be going throughout this whole entire summer, and not only do we let you guys hang out and feel some of these cool skins, but you guys also can go out for really cool hikes as well as some raptor exploring and things of that nature. Finally, I'd like to thank our friends at Nature or Roots Recycling for sponsoring us, as well as doing their part in helping keep our earth clean today, as well as every other day throughout the whole entire year. And actually, here's a quick video from our sponsors over at Roots Recycling.
Hi everyone, my name is Nathan Harper and I'm the owner and operator of Roots Recycling, and I wanted to give you guys a little update about some of the things that we're doing here to help the environment. Earth Day's coming up, and I want you guys to see where the material that you drop off to us, or that we pick up actually, where it goes and what it turns into. So first of all, we have this mountain of cardboard that we get from our customers, and we turn it into these huge bales of cardboard, and they get sent off to mills that make paper or other cardboard products or paperboard products. And those bales weigh about 1 ton apiece, 2,000 pounds. And so we get all that material, we put it onto a conveyor, and we run it up and bale it up, and then we send it out to the cardboard mill for it to be remade and reused, therefore helping the environment to make sure that all the materials that we use every day, especially nowadays with COVID-19, so many more people are getting boxes delivered to them from Amazon and various places, and we want to make sure that those are reused and they're not just filling up the landfill. So we have some other products that we deal with as well. These are our mixed paper bales. So we have mixed paper and newspaper and shredded books in these, and these go to different insulators. There's an insulator here in Penrose, Colorado, close to Canyon City, and so they make insulation to blow into attics, and their insulation that they make from this recycled paper material is actually way better for the environment than, say, cellulose or fiberglass. So those are just a few things that will help you understand where the material that comes into us goes and how it helps the environment. So stay safe and happy Earth Day.
Hi everybody, thanks for joining us. We're happy to be celebrating the 50th anniversary of Earth Day with you. My name is Tami Montoya. I'm the teacher and director at Earthkeeper Nature School. It's a program through the Nature and Wildlife Discovery Center for little kids, ages 4 to 7. What we do is we have a preschool and kindergarten setting that's outdoors, so the kids get to play and learn outdoors all of the time they're there. They get to learn and play at the Mountain Park campus in Beulah and also at the River campus in Pueblo. The Nature and Wildlife Discovery Center mission is to promote nature education and connection with nature, and that's what we do at Earthkeeper Nature School. We provide that opportunity for young children who benefit most from it. And forest schools and nature schools are not new. They're popular here in the US now, but they've been around in the Scandinavian countries and the UK for decades. And the reason for their popularity here in the US now is that there's a lot of research that supports the benefits for kids. So a lot of kids have spent much of their young lives on screens and indoors rather than outdoors playing with their friends. And unfortunately, kindergartens are indoors and they're at greater lengths of time for kids, and there are fewer opportunities to play with peers. So in order to provide an alternative to that, we started Earthkeeper Nature School, where our kids are outdoors anywhere from 6 to 12 hours a week, playing and exploring and benefiting from the outdoor settings. So many of the benefits that the outdoors provides are decreased stress and anxiety, more attention and focus, a caring and love for nature, nurturing their natural curiosity, and providing them the support and attention that little kids need, bringing their awareness to their connection to the environment, which we hope will inspire them to care for the planet. We provide extended periods of time in play. It's not a 20-minute recess. Like I said, it's 12 hours a week, up to 12 hours a week. We hope that our kids build resilience and coordination skills and inspire their natural curiosity and desire to learn. We have a couple of videos to show you. One is just some pictures of what we normally do at school when we're not distance learning like we are right now. And the other is related to our distance learning, where we take the kids on a virtual hike. So enjoy the hike, and thank you very much.
Hi Earthkeepers, welcome to another hike. Today we are at our mountain campus and we are going to go explore the stream and look for some mud. But right now, first what we're going to do is, if you're really quiet, you can hear all the birds in the trees. They're making lots of beautiful music for us to listen to. So we're just going to listen. There are so many birds out today. And also, Rory already made his first discovery. He tipped over a log and he said he found some ants. Ooh, they're all our little ants, if you can See them moving in there? They really blend in, their camouflage with the dirt. And I bet down underneath there, there's lots of worms. So many ants. There's hundreds and hundreds. We'll put their log back on so they can be safe. Tip that over, right?
Those leaves.
Some stuff living in the bark. There. All right, let's head to the stream. Because it is kind of chilly out today, me and Rory both wore our rain boots so we can get in the water and find some cool things and not freeze our toes. Rory found a pine cone. And see how it's all closed up? That's what happens when they get in the water. Video. The snow that's melting up here in the mountains, in this stream right here, is going to flow all the way back down the public to the same water. Dirt. This is like the dirt you see when the pocket gophers that we see over like by the mud kitchen. This is how they leave the dirt. Nice and soft. Worms really like this kind of moisture. We're gonna put him back in here so he stays in his home and he stays warm. Play a game. We're gonna play sink or float. So we're each gonna find things that we have right here with us. Like I'm gonna first pick a leaf. Rory, what are you gonna pick first? This is a good place to sink or float right here. Pick a pine cone, you can pick a stick. Or I found old man's beard. Okay. Okay. So this is what we picked. We have a leaf and old man's beard. We're gonna try to predict if it's going to sink or if it's going to float. Which one are you gonna do? Okay. On 3, we'll put it in and see what happens. 1. Wait, do you think it's gonna sink or float? Rory says float. I think it's gonna. My leaf is gonna float too. Ready? Go. They both float. Look at them. There they go. All the way down the stream. Bye, leaf. Bye, old man's beard. Bye, old man's beard.
Try to get it.
Try to get it. I lost the leaf already. Oh. Okay. Next, I want to try a pine cone. What do you want to try? How about a stick? Yeah. Or a rock. So next, we have a rock, medium-sized rock, and a pine cone. Okay, you're gonna hold it? Do you think it's gonna sink or float?
Sink.
Okay, Rory says sink for the rock. We'll do the rock first. Ready? Go. Let's go first. Oh, it's sunk all the way to the bottom. It's right there. See it? Okay, now the pine cone. I think the pine cone. What do you think the pine cone is gonna do, Rory? Huh? Bless you. Rory says the pine cone is going to float. Here we go. Ready? Set, go. It floats! Bye, pine cone. Woo! It's going on a water slide all the way down the street.
that's what I am. I care for the sea and the air and the land. I love all God's creatures, whatever they are. I am an Earthkeeper. I live my life gently on our Mother Earth. It's my simple gift. She knows what it's worth. You see, our little planet needs people who care, folks to watch over her, treating her fair.
So I'll plant a tree, choose to walk, not drive.
Recycle my garbage,
Turn the heat down inside. Grow my own garden, reduce what I use. I am an Earthkeeper.
Earthkeeper, Earthkeeper, that's what I am. I care for the sea and the air and the land. I love all God's creatures, whatever they are. I am an Earthkeeper. Earthkeeper, Earthkeeper, that's what I am. I care for the sea and the air and the land. I love all God's creatures, whatever they are. I am an Earthkeeper. I am an Earthkeeper. I am an Earthkeeper.
Hi, coming up next is a tour of our Mountain Park Lodge and Retreat Center with Ranger Dave. It was renovated in 2011, and when it's deemed safe to do so, we hope you join us for a visit.
Hi, I'm Dave Van Manen. Welcome to our new home here at the Horseshoe Lodge. And this is our interpretive center. And now let's head over to our new overnight facilities. So every room is unique. Let's take a look into this one. And after a day on the trails, we're going to feed you real well right here in this kitchen.
and happy Earth Day from the Nature and Wildlife Discovery Center. My name is Diana, and this handsome fellow here with me is Piper, one of our resident barn owls. We're so happy that you could join us for our Pajama Party Earth Day celebration. And here at the Nature and Wildlife Discovery Center, you're visiting our Raptor Center at this time. And we're so excited. Piper and I are going to talk to you a little bit today about owls. If as I'm talking, I tend to talk a little fast. So as I'm going along, if you should have questions, it's a little hard for me to answer them online right now, live with you. But if I do notice something coming up and I can answer it, I will. Otherwise, just leave your question in the comment section. And after my talk today, I'll be sure to go back to Facebook and answer your questions for you in the comment section. So thanks so much for it. So anyway, part of our job here at the Nature and Wildlife Discovery Center is helping wildlife. And we do that in kind of a specific way by doing what we call wildlife rehabilitation. And that means we provide care to sick, ill, injured, and orphaned wildlife. And specifically, we do birds of prey, such as Piper the barn owl, of course, and that means things like eagles, hawks, owls, falcons, vultures. And we also do large members of a group of birds called corvids, and that would be jays and crows and ravens. And we do the larger guys, so magpies on up are also birds that we treat here at our wildlife center. So when the birds come in, of course, our job is to try to help them recover from their injuries and go back to the wild. But that doesn't always happen for some of them. Piper is an example of that. Piper came in with an injury, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But he is, because of his injury, he's been left with a permanent disability, and he's no longer able to care for himself in the wild. So he has a new job now, and that is to be a teacher. Of course, birds of prey, their job in the wild is to be a hunter. But when they live in a captive situation, they don't usually have to hunt anymore. Dinner is delivered every day, sometimes right to the beak. Here you go, Piper, here's your mouse. And they don't have to really work very hard for food, but they still need to be busy and active. So we give them others kind of hang out for visitors and be exhibit or companion animals to one of our teaching birds. Or some of them stay because they like kids. Sorry, they don't like human kids, but they do like kids of their own species, and they help us out by being a foster parent. Right now, fortunately, because humans have slowed down a bit, we're not getting in as many injured or orphaned animals, which is kind of nice. It's a little break for us, but our foster parents are on their nests, and they're eagerly waiting for the arrival of babies anytime now. So as a barn owl, Piper is a very common in North America. Barn owls like to live in open country, and that's just because of their diet. They, of course, being raptors, are animal eaters, and they are specialists at catching small mammals. So voles, pocket gophers, mice, rats, that's their mainstay. And they would hunt for those in a grass type situation. But they also require a cavity for nesting in. Barn owls are cavity nesters. We call them barn owls, obviously, because they've adapted their lives to live inside of barns. But of course, before humans ever built barns and other structures, barn owls were out and about and making their living, and they were using cavities like hollow trees, maybe a cave in a cliff. They are capable, if they need to, of digging a hole in like soft soil, maybe along a creek bed. Maybe they found an old badger den or a fox den. They could certainly move into that. And then, of course, as humans, I'll tell them, as humans started building structures, barn owls explored those and discovered that living in a barn or a grain silo or an old abandoned house was a fabulous place to raise your family. And if you think about it, a barn owl might live in a barn for the same reasons you and I might live in a grocery store. Think about that for a second. Excellent food supply and wonderful shelter. And that's why barn owls use barns. There's excellent food supply because there's usually all kinds of rodents in a barn. And of course, the barn provides them with wonderful shelter. So barn owls, cavity nesting bird. Now, if you are a barn owl and you got to have food, you need to hunt. So like all birds of prey, they have basic pieces of equipment. Birds of prey all have really great vision. Their eyes are large so that they can locate their prey. If you're a hawk, an eagle, a falcon, a vulture, your eyes are built If you're an owl, again, your eyes are huge, but instead of long distance capabilities, your eyes are actually built more for nighttime vision. So they have a great set of eyes. Birds of prey also generally have very large, powerful wings. So if I can get Piper, if he'll flap a little bit. He's a little nervous with the wind. We're kind of sheltered right now, but he does have quite an impressive set of wings. He doesn't like to flap too much in the wind, and then also they have their very large feet, those toes, and those impressive talons on the end of the toes for catching their prey. And then finally, of course, it's hard to see on him, but trust me, there is a hook-shaped beak. Let me get him a little closer so you can maybe see his little hook there. I'll move the feathers. So he does have a hook-shaped beak so that he can rip and tear his prey apart. But each of those tools has their own special design based on the type of bird of prey that you are. So for owls, they've taken their tools for finding things to a really cool extreme. First of all, again, large eyes for nighttime vision, seeing very well in the dark. They see, depending on the owl, they see anywhere from at least 5 to 10 times more efficiently in the low light conditions than you and I can. So they have amazing eyes. Plus, owls also, they're learning. Some species have really good memory of their territory. So when they're hunting in their area, they sort of make a mental map of their places where they typically travel, so that they also have that mental memory or map, if you will, in their mind as they're traveling in the dark through their territory. So they do have a lot going on to help them do it. But what's really awesome about owls is while they can find animals in the dark with their eyes, it's difficult. Because if you think about it, if you've ever looked at a mouse or some other small creature out and about, they generally don't keep themselves in the open very long. Like, for instance, if a mouse gets loose in your house and you're trying to chase it, it doesn't run across the open living room floor. It runs under everything. It goes under the carpet, it goes under the sofa, under the TV, whatever. And your dog or cat, of course, makes a huge mess as they're chasing it. But the animals tend to run along walls and things like that to conceal themselves. So that can make it really hard to see in the dark, or even an owl. So they need another tool. So their tool is actually their hearing. Owls have an impressive set of ears. And how well they hear is really dependent on their face. So you'll notice on most owls, sorry about that, little bit of dust in the air here, they usually have sort of a round shaped face. And around each of the eyes, they have a circle pattern of feathers. And we call that a facial disc. So on Piper, he's a great one to use because he has a really well-developed facial disc. He has this beautiful circle of feathers around his eye. And that circle pattern of feathers there to help him gather sound. So if you think about it, his face is sort of like a satellite dish. He is capturing the sound, my apologies, and sending it to his ears. So the sound would hit his face, get caught by the flat feathers on his face right here, and it would travel to the edge of his facial disc. So he's got this dark outline of feathers here, and these feathers are kind of cool. The feathers that are pale are flat, but the feathers on the outer ring are actually curved. They're kind of like the letter C, and they create a tunnel all the way around his face for the sound to travel in. And of course, inside that tunnel is actually his ear opening. And sometimes if I ask Piper very politely, let me give him a little scratch here, he will let me separate his feathers. Oh, he's going to cooperate today. And let me kind of get my fingers out of the way. And perhaps if I come in close, there you go. Can you see his ear between my fingers? That's his ear opening. And then you can see how those feathers, there we go, create this tunnel all the way around his head, even down his beak. The feathers even are split down his beak so that sound can travel up and around and into the ears. And if we were to look closely, like if we took all the feathers off of his head and could see his ear openings, which are pretty much on the side of his head like ours behind the eye, one thing that we would notice though is that they're not straight across. They're actually uneven. So he has one ear a little bit high and one ear a little bit low. And what that does is allow him to hear sounds coming in from different angles so that he can pinpoint location. And that's an awesome tool for him to be able to find his prey. So basically, Piper would be probably sitting somewhere in the evening. He might be sitting on a fence post. He might be up on the roof of the barn. He might be in the barn sitting up on the rafters, but he'd be very quiet, or maybe even flying back and forth across the open field, kind of listening as he goes, trying to catch the sound of animals moving or, vocalizing. So his ears are so well tuned that he could find a mouse in the grass just by hearing that mouse eat a seed. And if you've never heard a mouse eat a seed, it's really easy to mimic the sound. All you have to do is, my fingernails are a little short, but if you snap your fingernails together, hear that little clicking? That's the sound of a rodent eating. And his ears are so amazing that he can hear that little tiny sound in the grass where he cannot see the mouse, but he can use sound to actually pinpoint location of where that mouse is hiding in the grass. And then, like all birds of prey, swoop down and drop his feet and capture the mouse. He does not have to see the mouse to catch it. He can simply do it all with his ears. And hearing for most owls is so critical that if they have an accident, maybe a head trauma, they get hit by a car, or they fly into windows, something like that, and they maybe damage the hearing on one side or both of their head. For most owls, if they lose their hearing ability, they cannot survive in the wild. So that's a problem that we see all the time. We have to make sure that the animals are hearing properly before they can go back to the wild. If they're an owl, it's really critical for them. So he hears the food, and then obviously, if you're going to hear it, you got to follow it, you got to chase it. So that's where those wings come in. So again, he's got those huge wings, and owl wings are really kind of awesome. If you look at Piper, he's sort of fluffy. He's like, don't be touching me. He's sort of fluffy, and that's important because his feathers are incredibly soft, and they're sort of frayed or fringed on the edges. I don't know if you can see, but let me put up his wing here. Let me see if he'll let me do it. Can you kind of see how his little edges of his feathers are sort of frayed on the, that's an important tool because that softness, that fray, that fringe, if you will, actually help him to fly silently. Most owl species, especially the ones that are really nocturnal, can fly without making a sound. And it's really amazing. And actually, I do have a wing here. And what helps them with that is on the edge of their wings. It's a little tricky here. See if I can do that. I don't know if you can see, but if you look really carefully at the edge of the wing, you can maybe see that there's a little bit of, get up to the camera here, kind of looks like a comb structure on that feather. And that's another area where he actually breaks apart. If you think about it, how many of you guys, I'm sure there's a lot of you that swim. So think about you're going swimming. And when you reach out to do your stroke, do you stroke with your hand open to pull against water, or do you close your hand? Well, you close it because that gives you more resistance to help drive yourself forward. So the owl, he still has to drive himself forward, but he breaks some of that resistance by having those edges kind of break softer through the air to make him quiet. There's a really quick little experiment that you can do. Take your hand, and if you close your hand like this and flap it in front of your ear for a second, like this, you can probably hear the air moving. So if you try it again, can you hear the air moving? Well, then, okay, now that's a hawk. When a hawk flies, he's about speed. He needs that resistance. So he makes a bit of noise when he flies. However, the owl, when it flies, its feather edges are separate. So open your hand and do the same thing, flap again, and you'll probably notice a whole lot less sound. And that's what's happening with the owl's wing. They're engineered for him to fly silently. And that's a really cool tool to have. So he's out hunting, he's floating over the grasses. No one hears him because his wings are silent. He picks up the sound of that mouse eating a seed in the grass. And then, of course, he follows it. He might hover over it for a second, and then he will drop head first initially down, and then at the last second, the head comes up, and then the feet drop down, and the feet will drop down and grab hold of that mouse, and he'll fly off with it and have it for dinner. So he has these amazing adaptations to help him do that. So when it does come to bird of prey feet, again, very powerful, Piper has his large talons. Actually, Piper's in need of a spa day. His talons are getting a little overgrown, so he'll have to have a spa day one of the sometime soon and trim those. So owls do have an interesting foot. In most birds of prey, they have 3 toes facing forward and 1 toe in the back. But owls, their little toe, if you will, their outer toe, is very flexible, and he can actually, oh, thank you, Piper, he can actually move his toe forward, or he can move it backward. And that just gives him a better way of grabbing, gives him actually more surface area because he can really spread out those toes to grab his prey. It's really cool. And then, of course, once you caught your prey, you get to eat it. If it's something small, like a mouse, Piper might swallow it whole. Again, raptors, when they eat, they are carnivores. And yes, they eat meat, but they don't just eat the meat of the animals. They actually, if it's small enough, eat the whole entire animal because they have to get nutrition from all the different parts. So again, to get good nutrients for your eyeballs, you and I, for example, if we want to eat something healthy for our eyes, we would eat a carrot. But Piper doesn't do carrots. So instead, yeah, he eats an eyeball. You got it. So he gets nutrients from the owl or from the mouse's eyeball to replenish his nutrients. So it's really critical for him to get a whole food diet. And now everything that he swallows, though, can't be digested. Some things like bones, fur, teeth, toenails, those type of things, feathers, they can't be completely broken down by his stomach and his digestive enzymes. So large items like that remain in his stomach. And once all the squishy stuff, the soft stuff that's been broken down, leaves the stomach and goes into the intestines, the undigestible materials remain. And then the stomach, which is a very powerful muscle, will kind of crush on it and create a really tight packed ball we call a pellet. And this is a pellet. This is actually Piper's pellet. Barn owls make cool pellets. Their saliva, as they regurgitate, that's how he gets rid of this. Yeah, that's yours. When the end of this, when the stomach is done and this ball or pellet has been formed, he's going to regurgitate it. And in a barn owl, it gets covered with this really cool saliva kind of slime thing. So all barn owl pellets are kind of dark. But if we were to break this open, inside the pellet would be bones and things like that of what Piper has eaten. So I just cracked this one in half with my fingers. And I don't know if you can see, but I'll get close to the camera. There's little bones and things in there from the mouse or rat that Piper had for dinner. So birds of prey all create pellets, not just owls. Owls are famous for it. They have weak digestive enzymes. So when they cast pellets, that's what we call it. Instead of saying the owl pukes his pellet, we say the owl casts his pellet. So elegant. So when he casts his pellet, he has a lot of bones in it. A hawk or a falcon, their stomach acids are stronger, and they actually can digest a lot of small bones. So we don't see a lot of bones in their pellets. Mostly it's fur. But with an owl, so most people are familiar with owl pellets, but actually all birds of prey cast pellets with the items they can't digest. So Piper, who's actually been really polite and quiet today, usually makes a lot of noise, which is why we called him Piper in the first place. But Piper came to us. Piper's been with us now for 7 years. A wildlife officer found him lying in a ditch along I-25 in, I think it was in the fall. And he thought actually the owl was dead. He thought he saw a deceased owl on the side of the road. And he stopped, just deciding, I'll just pick up the carcass, the body, and dispose of it properly. And when he reached down to grab the carcass with his bare hand, well, guess what? The carcass reached back. So when he came in, the officer's hand is wrapped, the owl is wrapped. So somebody took care of the officer, and some of us took care of Piper. But anyway, what had happened is Piper had damaged his right wing. He had broken the bones in his hand and wrist, because birds, of course, they have a wingtip like this. If you think about your arm and their wing, are actually very similar. So he actually does have kind of a hand and a wrist and a forearm, and of course his long arm, the humerus here. So he broke the bones in this area and this area of his wing. And we did our best. When those tiny fractures, it's really hard to set them and get them to heal without creating damage to the joint. And that's what happened to Piper. He's lost mobility in his wing joint, so he can't move his wing the way he needs to fly. But we couldn't really exercise and test his ability to move his wrist very well, because when Piper came in, all the feathers on that wing were actually cut off. So on birds, of course, they have these long feathers on their wings. We call the primaries. And then they have another group right here, the secondaries. So all these long feathers on Piper were all cut off to be about this long. And it was really strange. We're like, well, who would have cut all his feathers? And it was a really big mystery for a long time. And one day we kind of took a guess at what we think happened to Piper. We think Piper was across the interstate. He got hit in a car and he ended up on the road. And then with maybe his wing outstretched, and the second car came by and ran over the feathers of that wing. And the tire acted like a knife and cut all the feathers as the tire went over it. So we actually had to wait almost an entire year for all of Piper's feathers to molt. That means shedding the damaged ones and growing back new ones. So it was a year of just patiently waiting and then giving him some time to exercise once those feathers came back in. But we saw after just a couple of months, no way Piper's going back to the wild. So we asked permission for him to remain with us here at the Raptor Center. And certainly the Fish and Wildlife Service gave us that permission for him to remain and be a teaching bird. So he's been doing that ever since with us. And he's just a sweetie. We just really enjoy Piper's company. And usually he's very vocal. On days when you want him to talk, he says nothing. So it's very fun to hang out with him. But he is just lovely. And he's one of our staff's favorite birds to go do programs with. Anyway, I really enjoyed talking with you today. There's so much going on. Back to rehab for just a second. When these guys do get to go back to the wild, it's always a joyous occasion for us. And last Monday, April 20th, we had the opportunity to return a great horned owl back to the wild. This owl, we don't know what happened to it. Some people in their found it in their backyard in Pueblo West, and they were kind enough to capture the owl, and which they said was quite an adventure for them, but they managed to get it into a crate, and then they drove it to our center for care. And when he came in, we discovered that he'd hit something very hard on the chest, because his wings and his chest all the way kind of a straight line across. So I don't know if he hit a fence or a car, but he was very bruised and very, very sore. There weren't any breaks or anything like that. So we went to the vet a couple days later just to confirm there weren't any fractures with an x-ray, and he was fine. Mostly he just needed time to heal, let the bruising and the soreness in his muscles and joints, relax. We did give him some medication to help him with that, and then just let him rest and then exercise. So last week he was in our big flight enclosure and he was flying like a champ and certainly wanted to go home. So Monday we returned him to Pueblo West and let him go. And at the end of my talk, you'll see a brief video of his release. It was a joyous occasion. I got to the honor of the toss. It was my birthday, so I thought, what better way to celebrate your birthday than have a party releasing an owl? So if I look really happy, I am, because it was a great day for me. So lots of other things going on today. Certainly we have one more speaker coming up. Ranger Pine will be here at 1 o'clock, and he's going to talk to you about Wolves of the West. If you want to learn more about our programs, especially, we're not sure what's going to happen, but we're still planning on summer camp. One of my favorites is Raptor Camp, and that's great. That's for 4th through 6th graders, and you actually get to come and work with us side by side, learning about birds of prey and helping them out. It's a great camp for that. So we're hoping that social distancing and things like that will be allowing us to hold Raptor Camp. But if you're interested, definitely sign up, because that one fills fast. And then for older kids, for middle school and high school, later in the summer, we also have Raptor Naturalist Camp, where you might actually learn to handle Piper. I know, aren't you excited? and actually learn how to give a raptor talk, just like I'm doing today. So that's a fun camp too, and that's for older kids. So if you're interested in that, certainly visit our website, which is hikeandlearn.org, for more information on that as well. So thank you guys for tuning in. Please stay tuned after the intermission for Ranger Pine. Thank you again for joining us. Be safe, be well, and enjoy this gorgeous Earth Day. Thanks so much.
Welcome to this introductory presentation on wolves in the West. If you have any questions, please leave those in the comment box, and we have someone who will be fielding those questions with answers during the presentation. My name is David Martin, also known as Ranger Pine to many people, and I'm with the Nature and Wildlife Discovery Center, a nonprofit organization which stewards two campuses, one at the Pueblo Mountain Park in Beulah, and the Nature and Raptor Center in Pueblo. We're an organization committed to connecting people with nature and enhancing environmental education in our community and abroad through educational programming, camps, and guided hikes. The following introduction is a presentation on wolves in the West, and it uses science-based information from the International Wolf Center, which is a wolf education organization based out of Minnesota. Enjoy the presentation.
Wolves are the largest member of the wild canine family. This is the same family of animals as your family dog, coyotes, and foxes. Wolves are predators and carnivores. We know that wolves and dogs share a common ancestor. Wolves were the first animals domesticated between 15 and 30,000 years ago. But no one knows where, when, or how relationships between wolves and humans developed that led to the evolution of dogs. Wolves were intentionally exterminated in the West by the 1930s. They are presently found in parts of 8 Western states. Today, we will talk briefly about wolf ecology and the history of relationships between humans and wolves in the West. Wolves around the world primarily hunt ungulates. Ungulates are hoofed animals, members of the deer and bovid families. Some, such as bison and mountain sheep, have limited ranges in the West and are not widely available as prey. Where found, beaver make up a large part of the wolf's diet in the spring, summer, and fall. Why not in the winter? Beavers are active year-round. But in the wintertime, they are safely sealed beneath the ice, and although present, are not available to wolves at that time of year. Wolves live in packs. Each pack is really just a family. They consist of the breeding pair, or parents, pups born in the current year, and surviving offspring from the previous year called yearlings. Most offspring eventually leave the pack in which they were born. Animals that leave the pack are called dispersers. Dispersers roam about seeking an absence of a breeder within an existing pack or seeking empty spaces and territory in which to attract a potential mate to begin their own pack. Most wolves disperse as yearlings. Dens shelter newborn pups. These pups are born in April and May, so right about this time of year. Dens can be holes in the ground, caves, or even hollow logs. The average litter size is 6 pups, except in the high Arctic where they tend to be smaller in number. These pups are tiny, weighing about a pound at birth, and they can't see or hear for their first 2 weeks of life. Only the mother and the pups use the den, and they only use it at this time of year. As mammals, the pup's first nutrition is milk. Their first set of teeth emerge at about 3 weeks, and at about this time, they come out of the den and start exploring their world. They can now see and hear and are able to interact with pack members. They start eating meat when they're about 6 to 8 weeks old. but they have to get their meat in a very special way. One of the very interesting things about a wolf is its stomach. It's kind of like a balloon because it can blow up, stretch out, and hold over 20 pounds of meat. In the following regurgitation video we're going to see that a wolf can control where they regurgitate and how much. This behavior is not just the mom. All members of the pack can regurgitate food for the young. We're going to see this mother up here. She's going to regurgitate a little bit of meat for these pups. Right there. She's going to move away and do a little bit more over here. And one last time over here. Wolves live in territories. A territory is a large space where one pack lives. Neighboring families or packs live next door, and together this makes up the wolf population of a region. Territories are defended spaces. Packs protect their food and their young and their family from other wolves. To avoid fights, wolves mark their territories. Can a wolf put up a fence? Can they put up no trespassing signs? Nope. So how do you think they mark their territory? That's right. They use their pee and their scat. Wolves howl for a number of reasons, but howling also serves to let other wolves in surrounding areas know that this territory is occupied. Wolves can sometimes hear howls up to 6 miles away. Still yet, individuals and packs sometimes sneak into a neighboring territory, and if caught, fights result and intruders may be injured or killed. Now, the wolves are not being mean when they're doing this. This is all about survival, protecting their territory so that they can find enough food and shelter for their family to live another day, another week, another month, and another year. Average lifespan of a wild wolf is between 2 and 5 years. In most places around the world where wolves are found, they are primarily killed by humans. I've lost my cursor here. Find that. There we go. Adaptations. Adaptations are special things an animal develops over time to aid them in surviving. Wolves come with incredible body designs. The following adaptations aid them in hunting for food. 1, they have an incredible sense of smell. It's about 100 times as strong as a human. They're known to pick up a scent from 1.5 miles away, but usually it is much closer. There may be lots of deer and elk hidden behind trees or hills that can't be seen, but they can be smelled. They also have excellent hearing, and their eyesight is good both day and night. Wolves usually hunt for and eat animals much larger than themselves. Western wolves, for example, weigh around 90 to 110 pounds, while prey such as deer weigh 100 to 200 pounds, and elk 300 to 500 pounds. Wolves have muscles in their heads that make their jaws so powerful It provides over 400 pounds of pressure in a square inch, an incredible crushing ability. This helps them bring down large prey and 2, crunch through those very large bones. Do you know what's in the middle of bones? That's right, marrow. Bone marrow is very nutritious, and the wolves can crack those large bones to get at the marrow. A wolf's coat is another important adaptation. Do you remember what I said about dens? Do wolves use those most of the year? Nope. That's why their fur is very important. They have 2 layers of fur, like a lot of mammals. They have an outer layer of guard hairs that helps repel moisture, and they have an undercoat which insulates, keeps them warm. The color of their coat camouflages them. Wolves tend to lighten in age as they age. Lighten in color as they age, I'm sorry. Wolves have very large feet with webbing or skin between the toes. As a wolf steps down, their toes spread out, and this helps them to walk on top of snow like people wearing snowshoes. They don't stay on top all the time, but they stay on top more often than their prey, like deer, elk, moose, bighorn sheep, and other members of the deer and bovid families, which have hooves. Hooves cut through snow and provide little support in staying on top. A wolf's feet also help when caching or digging holes to save or cache their food for later. Their feet also help when swimming, crossing rivers, and it helps the females when they're digging their dens. In this following video, we're going to watch this wolf, and she's going to be picking some pine cones off a tree to roll down a hill. This is a very fun thing for wolves to do. They like to play. Play is a very important part of a wolf's life. So we're going to watch this, but I want you to pay attention to her feet when she starts moving down the hill, and you'll see that she's spreading out her toes and using those webbed feet to stay mostly on top of the snow. If you look close at her feet, you can see that her toes are spread out. She does pounce through the snow sometimes, but watch as she walks on top of the snow here. Wolves once existed throughout what became the United States. As pioneers moved west during the 1800s, much of the land was settled. Forests were cut, prairies were plowed up for cropland. Wild game was shot for food and replaced by domestic animals. Territorial, state, and eventually the federal government supported killing wolves through bounties, which is money paid to citizens who killed wolves. Hundreds of thousands of wolves died as settlement progressed from east to west. By the late 1930s, wolves had been eliminated from the West, except for a few along the Mexican border, and some survived as well in Wisconsin and Michigan until the 1950s. By 1960, only a small population remained in Minnesota of all the wolves that once existed within the United States. Wolves sometimes cause problems because they are predators. Conflicts can be highly emotional for people. Unfortunately, myth and fables heighten people's reaction towards wolves. Modern-day wildlife management attempts to sort out fact from myth and apply remedies to these problems. The problems that wolves can cause are depredating on livestock and pets, competing with hunters for big game, and, at times, human safety. Wolves are territorial, and they will kill other canids they catch in their territories. So keep your dog on a leash and with you when in wolf country. This is not just about wolves. Bears, coyotes, and cougars also kill dogs. Even small dogs and cats are at risk in urban areas from cougars and coyotes. So be aware of the wildlife that lives around you and what you need to do to protect your pet from being harmed. Some people are afraid of wolves, largely because of stories that they are told from a very young age, such as Little Red Riding Hood and other movies and stories we've seen about wolves. And when we hear such stories or see wolves in movies, it's important that we've got to remember that these are not based on facts, but these are based on myths. It's rare to see wolves in the wild because they tend to be leery of and avoid humans. So be safe. Never feed wild animals. Such animals become habituated to people through offerings of food. Sometimes we call this conditioning. The consequence of this include a danger to humans, maybe not you yourself, but maybe others. And it forces wildlife officials to kill habituated wild animals. Wolves almost never attack people. They want to stay away from people because they are actually scared of us. It's important to always think of safety when you're in wild places. Respect all wildlife by keeping a safe distance away. Wolves need wildlands to do well. Wildlands are large spaces of forests and prairies where few people live. The larger the space, the greater the number of wildlife that can be supported. In wildlands, wolves have less conflict with people. Every year, more and more of what remains of our wildlands is developed for people to live in or recreate in. How do we preserve wildlands? Not just for wolves, but for other plants and animals that need them to thrive. This is a conservation question that we must answer. Americans need to do a better job of maintaining wildland spaces. Wolves are an integral part of the complex food webs. As food webs break down through eliminating certain plants or animals, such as wolves, environments become damaged and less healthy. Deer and elk populations tend to grow large when their predators are gone, and those animals will eat more and more of the plant food sources. As these herds grow, they become more crowded. This helps spread disease. Meanwhile, diminished food supplies can also cause starvation. Deer and elk may move in search of food, damaging crops and causing millions of dollars of damage to farmers each year. Wolves, through the kills that they make, also supply many birds and animals, from chickadees to bears, with food, especially at critical times of the year like early spring, when food may be in short supply. Wolves need three things to survive and thrive in their environment. Would anybody like to guess what those three things are? Wolves need food, wildlands or space, and tolerance. Tolerance does not mean that every person must like wolves. It means that people accept the existence of wolves living on the landscape and allow them to live. We've shown that we can remove the wolf from the landscape through intolerance, as was done throughout the United States before the 1960s. Living with wolves is not easy for some people. Wolves cause conflicts by feeding on livestock at times, and sometimes they make hunting big game more challenging. They are also a powerful predator, but they very rarely attack people in North America. Wolves do play an important role in our ecosystems, and they should be allowed to exist among all the other creatures out there in our wildlands.
This concludes the introductory presentation on wolves in the West. Thank you for joining. I hope you learned something about wolves today. And if you'd like to learn more about wolves, their legal status, how they affect the local ecology, wildlife, livestock, hunting, things like that, please make sure to sign up and register for a more comprehensive and data-rich presentation we'll be giving on May 13th. That will be a webinar that you can register for. So you can find that information to register for that up above in the information on the video, or possibly in the chat box. And you could also visit our website at hikeandlearn.org, hikeandlearn.com. And in just a few minutes, we'll be hearing a little bit more from our director, Patty Kester. So stay tuned.
Thank you so much for joining us for Earth Day today. Hope you have enjoyed it. Remember, memberships with Nature and Wildlife Discovery Center are half off today. If you have additional questions or comments, please go to the comment section on Facebook and do that. We hope you have a wonderful, wonderful Earth Day. Step outside, enjoy the sunshine, and plant a flower, attract some bees and butterflies. That's great for the environment. Pick up some trash, but step outside and enjoy the day. Hope you've enjoyed this. Have a good Earth Day, and thank you so much for joining us for Earth Day.